Welcome to this latest session. I'm one of the last panel session at the Mindful Drinking Festival. And so welcome to you all, and welcome to two of my guests here that are Lauren from We Love Lucid and Amanda, who you may have seen earlier in the festival as well. And maybe we might get Kirsten. She was due to come, but I also realised that we set all these dates up at the end of September and start of October. And it feels like a very long time ago, the start of October now, right? It's been a long old month.
It's a long one.
So that's cool. So today we're gonna touch on the topic of friendships. We've been talking a bit over this weekend about getting back out into the world. You may have been hunkering down over October if you've not been drinking, keeping yourself to yourself. So going out and socializing and then thinking about friendships are two things that are really good to do right now, because you want to be able to keep to whatever goal that you've chosen, whether that's to carry on alcohol free or whether you're now looking at altering your drinking habits as you move forward into the rest of the year. And so I'm just going to get our two guests to introduce themselves, but also tell us their killer tip for finding new friends. Amanda, tell me.
Yes. Okay. Well, hey there. I'm Amanda Kuda. I am a life and spiritual coach for high achieving women who want to change their relationship with alcohol. And my biggest tip or biggest learning point in navigating friendships alcohol free is that no true sustainable friendship is forged over a liquid bond. So if you are under any sort of disillusion that alcohol is the thread that's holding your relationships together or the requirement to build a relationship, you're wrong.
That's really good, because we always think that. I'm going to come back to that and unpick that a little bit more though, because how do you know and how do you begin to pick up whether there really is a friendship there or not? And that can still be quite frightening, especially if you decide that there's not.
Totally, yeah.
Lauren, what about you? Now, Lauren, I think you're a brand new mum as well, so that's change your drinking is a big life change. Having kids is a big life change as well. You might be thinking about friendships in that context too.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point, actually. Well, so just for those of you who don't know, my name's Lauren and I am the founder of We Love Lucid, which is the UK's first alcohol-free travel company, making sober friends. So for me, something that I found really useful was meetup.com, actually. And I know, Laura, you're events on meetup.com as well. And I know people often think, oh, I'll have to find sober friends that don't necessarily drink. But what I found useful as well is to think about hobbies, things I like to do. And there's also a lot of people that do those things and join those groups that just don't drink so much. So it's not necessarily that you have to find people that don't drink at all. There are a lot of people out there that actually just don't drink that much, and it's perfectly possible to have good friendships with them as well. Although at the time when you are drinking, it does not seem that there is anybody out there that doesn't drink that much. So yeah, meetup.com is huge for me. And Laura, what you were talking about becoming a mum, and it's something that somebody suggested to me today, is to start my own sober mom or alcohol-free moms group. Apparently in these kind of mom and baby groups, I haven't been to any yet, they're really booze focused, and I mean, let's be honest, that's just going to be boring as hell for me or anybody else who doesn't drink. So I'm thinking of starting my own one on meetup.com. Anybody can start their own group.
They use Meetup well in Scotland, actually. So So yeah, you should definitely give it a go. And the queer community use Meetup pretty well. So our Queers at Vias is on Meetup. I'm going to sort of divide this discussion into two topics. So we'll come back to how you find friends, but start a little bit with the point that Amanda made, which is about how you look at your current friendships and how you make sure that you nurture those that you want to keep, but you can also begin to rethink them without the lens of alcohol. And I'll start back with you, Amanda, but obviously there's three of us, so we can make this quite conversational. It's really frightening, right? When you think that the thing that you only do with your mates is go out and drinking, and that you're about to tell them that that's now the one thing you're not going to do. There's no wonder people are frightened about talking to their mates about changing drinking. And then they will be quite fearful now of coming out of Sober October and saying, hey guys, when I said it was Sober October, what I meant was I'm carrying on. How do you begin to even evaluate those friendships and think about that?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of different paths. And one is to just keep on the path that you're on and test it out and see what works and kind of negotiate from there, but also to be open-minded that you might have to explore a new path. And that's really scary, right? Because so often we look at friendships, the success of friendships and the quantity and the time. We have all these friendships that we've had for such a long time. And what will we do if that friendship doesn't work? Or we have all of these friends, and what will we do if they're whittled down to a few? And I would encourage you to start looking in friendships in terms of depth. How deep and vulnerable can you go with those people versus how many people do you have in your I almost said Rolodex, but no one knows what that is anymore, in your phone book. Good. Yes. How many numbers do you have in your phone book, or how many friends do you have on your Facebook or your whatever, versus how deep and vulnerable can you be with those friends? And if you stop looking at it in perspective of time and quantity and more in perspective of depth, it makes it a little more clear as to who might stick around. But honestly, it's probably going to be a smaller number. And that seems scary at first because that makes you feel uncool or unpopular or shunned from the tribe. And if you can't have a vulnerable conversation with someone about a decision as simple as what you will or will not put in your body and think that they will respect that, I got to be honest that person is probably not your friend. They're not in it for the long haul if they're going to judge you, shun you, hate you, abandon you because you choose to focus on your health. Unfortunately, that person's probably not that great.
I mean, there's some big assumptions that we make in our head anyway, isn't there? First of all, we assume that our mates want that drinking too. Mm-hmm. And actually there may be a sense of relief, certainly for my friends, that they didn't have to have every interaction with me very boozy. Mm-hmm. And the second is I discovered friends that had actually, I thought, life just changes and they move on. But that wasn't what was happening, is they were avoiding coming out with me because it always meant a very drunk night. And for them, that wasn't what they wanted to do anymore. So I actually reconnected with lots of friends and realized that my fear about friends drifting away wasn't founded because they were all happy with that for themselves as well.
Yes,
Until you test it, you don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, you make the assumption that it's like doom and gloom and worst case scenario, but really you being bold and saying the thing might be enough to create more open conversation that other people are wanting to have, but are also too afraid to have, or also they agree with, or they're either tired of their own drinking or they're tired of your drinking. And either way, it's a blessing in disguise.
Yeah. Do you, Lauren, do you think, there are still friends who will be very challenging. They still just won't get it. Not because they don't want to be your friend necessarily, but because of that alcocentric nature of society. And they don't realize that what they're doing is subtly bullying you. How do you begin to answer those questions, or answer that, well, why don't you just have one, when you want to also keep that friendship?
Yeah, good question. My situation is probably a little bit different because over the years I've been traveling around, and that coupled with my kind of erratic behavior while on drugs and alcohol, I didn't have a lot of really good friends, I have to say. It was mainly associations that I partied with, and a lot of them fell away. But what I would say is definitely, it's quality over quantity. And if you're willing to reassess your relationship with alcohol, I suppose, you know, it's all about being more authentic, and that would apply to your friendships as well. And you have to be kind of ready, you know, for the eventuality that some of these people will, you know, they'll fall away. And if somebody is going to try and do that and trying to make you feel bad and shame you for drinking and saying it's just one, I don't know, maybe they're not really the best person for you to be around. And often the people that do that, you know, I used to get really, really annoyed at people that used to say that, and I used to be quite defensive. Now I just know they're doing it out of ignorance, because they don't really know what it feels like to be in my shoes. And I just don't hang around with them anymore.
I think there is that idea that you need to cut people a bit of slack, which sounds awful, isn't it? Because you're doing something really big and brave and bold, and they're exhibiting a behaviour that is slightly bullying, because they're trying to get you to do something you don't want to do. But they're also doing it in the context of a society where we've almost been taught to act that way towards people who aren't drinking. And part of the change is about educating those friends and being patient, because it's really hard, right? What do you reckon, Kirsten, Amanda? Do you reckon it's can we just give them a bit of time to get used to that fact? Or
yes, and really, I think that's the magic, is that if it's all about how you present it, and you are, unfortunately, because we live in this weird conversation right now where everyone's trying to be so sensitive, and that's great, but we are in a situation where we, as the non-drinkers, are the anomaly, which means we get to go first and we have to start the conversation. And sometimes that means, because you're first, you have to give people a little time to catch up to you. And what I find, especially in that kind of scenario, Laura, where you're talking about a bully, is that how a bully, either overt or covert, because there's the bully that's like, oh, just have one. And then there's the other person who's still kind of trying to persuade you, who's much more gentle, like, oh, you're not that bad, one won't hurt. You know, there's two different energies when it comes to like someone trying to persuade you to drink. One's trying to push you and one's kind of trying to pull you. And either way, the best thing to do, the most productive thing to do, is to respond with kindness and know that you are still healthily uneducated on what to say and do, or else you wouldn't be feeling anxiety. You would have confidence in what to do at the moment. So if you, who is someone who's pursuing this lifestyle, is still a little unsure on your feet, how can you expect other people who are just being exposed to this to know what to do? So I think that in those situations, when you have someone who's trying to either bully you or persuade you into drinking or make you feel ashamed, the best thing that you can do is respond with kindness and confidence, even if the kindness and confidence are fake. Because a bully is just trying to get a rise from you, and you're never going to get any sort of positive result, except for maybe a puff up of your ego for a second because you said something snappy. You'll never get a good result or get them to change their behavior if you say something snarky or try to like belittle them or put them in their place for being an asshole. And the other person who's just, kind of on the edge, you're going to get more out of them if you approach them with kindness as well. So it's kind of the old adage that you'll attract more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. So if you just kindly say, hey, I understand, and I'm actually really committed to this right now, and stick to your guns, or offer to have an open conversation, even if it's not in that moment, at a later date with one of those people. If you reach out to the bully, or if you reach out to the person who is trying to persuade you and say, hey, you know what you said kind of bothered me or upset me or threw me off the other day. This is actually a really important thing to me. I'd love to talk with you more about it offline. How does that sound? You're opening up the opportunity to get advocates and allies versus to get someone who's just turned off by you and by your behavior. And I think an ally is the best thing that you can have. Even if it's not a strong friendship, an ally is better than a bully or, a naysayer.
Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure that it's a very British thing, but certainly when you tell somebody you're not drinking, they get very defensive because they think you're questioning their drinking, even though that has not happened at all. Have you had that at all, Lauren? Is that sort of did that ever happen to you? People getting defensive?
Yeah, it does. It happens quite a lot, and you'll often find people will go into, their own. There's two different things. people you can see they don't like it actually, and because you're literally holding up a mirror to their own drinking habits. But then there's other people, you tell them and they start telling you about, oh, well, I'd really like talking about their own drinking habits and things like that, whenever you're not really asking them to. But that happens quite a lot. And I think just on what Amanda said there, I found that closer to the time. So when I first quit, it was really hard when people said, oh, just go on, have one. It made me annoyed. And I think at the time, it's good to even sometimes just have a short answer about why you're not doing it. And then, like you said, Amanda, if it is somebody you think deserves a fuller answer and that somebody you want to maintain a friendship with, do pull them aside and say, explain why. But at the time, imagine you've just quit drinking a week ago and you're in a group of people and they're egging you on and trying to have one, and you're trying to tell them at that time why you're doing it. It's maybe a little bit triggering. So I think it's good to maybe, at the time, just say your short answer why you're not doing it. And then if it's somebody that you want to continue friendships with, then, take them aside. But yeah, the defensive thing, I don't know. Is it a British thing, do you think, Laura?
I don't know. Amanda.
It's certainly not. It's like that verbal vomit of, you just said, it's like anything right now where we're in this society where there's all these like, opposing sides. I was going to bring up one that would be very controversial, but anything that's controversial, if you bring up one side, the other person automatically wants to explain why they're not like that or what's going on for them, as though like it's just like a verbal vomit of discomfort. And it totally happens all the time. Like, oh, well, I only drink with these things, or I've been trying to cut back, or I could never do that. And they think it's an open invitation to spill their woes or their thoughts.
In some ways, it's good to expect that. Know that that's going to happen. Know that it happened to all of us. Yeah. And just let it wash over you and try not to take it to heart, because it is part of societal conditioning. It is part of life anyway. When you tell someone something, they often like to give you their opinion about it. I'm terrible. If you tell me a problem, I want to go and fix it immediately. And sometimes I just want to tell you the problem. And I've had to learn. I sometimes even have to say to friends, are you telling me this because you want to tell me, or are you telling me this because you're hoping I can help you with solutions? Because I will now I can now tailor my response based on what you need from me here and now. So it's not unusual. It's human behavior. So don't take it personally, right? That's a really important thing.
Yeah, it's not necessarily them trying to persuade you. It's just they don't know what to do with that information and they're uncomfortable. So they just
exactly.
One of the things that Millie talked about earlier this month, in Making Friends, she talked about she became the orchestrator of new style of social events with her friends. So she didn't wait and just turn up to the pub every time that they talked about it and just sucked it up, but she started to organise a whitewater rafting and all those sorts of things. Now, Lauren, you do all this all the time. What sort of things could people do that aren't so alcohol focused? I guess it doesn't have to have no alcohol. You're not telling people not to drink, but certainly you're shifting the dial towards something that's a bit more experiential. What sort of things are people doing?
There's so many things you get involved in. Just really depends on your person, what you're into. But anything cultural, outdoorsy. Some people are into more adventure kind of stuff. Lots of people get into their fitness, don't they, and feel good activities when they quit drinking. So that opens lots of different doors. I mean, you mentioned Millie does the whitewater rafting, and loads of foodie activities as well. Food becomes a big thing. Still is a big thing for many people. For me,
it's a bit like, do you remember, I used to love getting time out before the internet was as good as it is now. I used to love getting time out and putting a ring around all the exciting things in the paper version of time out. And you sort of need to do the online version of that. You need to remind yourself what there is around you, because the chances are you've forgotten, right? And you don't know what will float your boat anymore, because your weekends have been recovering drinking, and actually there's tons out there, isn't there?
Yeah, so many things. I mean, often people think back to what they used to like before alcohol took over their whole, every weekend, and what things were they into when they were a kid, even, or in the teenager and stuff like that. I mean, I used to go horse riding all the time, so I've kind of gotten into that again. And languages I've always enjoyed. So I've continuously been learning languages throughout my life, but those are just a few different things. But yeah, and then a lot of people end up owning or starting businesses, similar to what I've done. For example, start a travel business. I absolutely love travel, language, culture, and I'm a sober person now, so that was just the perfect thing for me to do. And so it really opens a lot of doors, exploring these options.
Yeah, you just sort of need to be creative and start looking, and if anything just piques your interest, invite a friend. You know, we probably haven't had to do that for a long time. We've probably just turned up to the pub, and when everyone else is there, and that was all that was necessary. Now you've got a bit more time for organisation. What did you do when you first gave up, Amanda?
Geez, I really tried to make my old social circle work. And to be fair, they are wonderful, amazing people who really accommodated me much more than I would have thought. And I also I literally just moved to Austin. I was a year fresh in Austin, Texas, and had just made this new group of friends. So I was in the situation of, oh my gosh, I just put all this effort into building these friendships. They'll surely dump me like a bad habit because there's no longevity here. And I was completely shocked with how accommodating they were to making sure there was sparkling water, or making sure we split the check at the restaurant so I didn't have to pay for their booze. They were honestly so kind and thoughtful, specifically for being a group of people who were pretty heavy, weekend drinkers. But then I started to try and filter away from that a little bit, because I stopped being fulfilled by trying to do the same things I was doing just with me being sober, and I wanted deeper connection. So at that point, I did a couple things. I started orchestrating, kind of like Lauren said, events where we would drink none or very little, like hikes or day trips and adventures with that same friend group. And I also started integrating myself into new friend groups that just didn't have drinking as a priority. And so trying to create experiences for your current friends where there is a little less drinking is definitely helpful. And then just also putting yourself out there in new experiences and realizing that there's actually a lot more people out there who are living a similar lifestyle than you might try to convince yourself of.
Yeah, I was thinking about how actually lazy drinking makes us in terms of organizing things, restaurant, pub, dinner, drinking, home, and I can understand that because we all lead busy lives. And so organizing things are harder than that. Isn't that we don't want to do them. It's that they just seem a lot more hard to get the logistics for. So if you become the person who makes those logistics happen, just turn up here and I've sorted everything else out, people will have a good time and they will want to do them and they will thank you for it, and you'll get a lovely buzz for having organized that thing that everyone had always thought about but couldn't quite get round to. And so you should see that as quite an interesting challenge in terms of breaking your friendship group out of their old traditional patterns and introducing things that they've talked about over beers but never quite got done.
Totally.
Absolutely.
It's actually quite surprising how, I don't know how I continued doing those things time and time again for so many years. I mean, if you think about it, it's just utterly boring. But yeah, that's what I just.
It's also possible that you end up wasting experiences that you've paid for. Somebody was talking the other day about the fact that they went to see a band that they really like, but was so drunk by the time they came on, they don't remember. I spent so much on theatre tickets, but don't remember the second half. I mean, what a dickhead. What a complete dickhead.
Yeah. We were talking about, with a girlfriend of mine recently, people who were on our bucket list to see perform. And I'm pretty sure that I said Lady Gaga. And then I ring her back and I'm like, hey, just by the way, I want to tell you, I actually did see Lady Gaga 10 years ago, but I was really drunk. And that's really sad because I know it was a kick-ass performance and I paid so much for those tickets and I was probably obliterated by the end of the night. And I'm sorry, Lady Gaga, if you're out there, I respect you and your work. And I wish I remembered it.
Is that, it's actually, yeah, gosh, isn't that a thing to think, wow, you've been to see an artist and you decided that drinking was more important than appreciating their talent and their skill.
Yes.
Oh God, we're terrible people.
Oh. And I mean,
And you do it with cities. Go ahead.
Oh, there were so many concerts that I went to when I was like a teenager or in my early 20s before drinking became important that were such spectacular events. I mean, obviously, I was in love with like boy bands. So you see those people up close and you're just like, oh, and that experience is still the same as an adult if you just let it be the full experience. It's actually really wonderful to see the people who you love perform live.
Yeah, absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
What about you, Lauren? Are there any stories of things that you were really looking forward to where you just were fucked throughout the whole of it?
Well, I used to do it on a sort of, I used to go to countries to travel and spend the whole time, you know, my plan was I used to always say, no, this time it's going to be different. So I would be in the UK for a short time, saving some money. Then I'd take off to a country for about 6 months or so with the idea of, you know, exploring and getting to know the country. And I used to always do the same thing, just sort of end up attracting people who used to just like getting completely rat-arsed like myself. And in my mind, I was exploring the country and the people and the sort of, but it was really just the underbelly. I got into all sorts of mischief, but I didn't end up seeing half of the things and the places that I wanted to. I mean, I spent 6 months in Cape Town, South Africa, and I didn't even go up Table Mountain. I ended up in some of the most dodgiest places you could possibly imagine, which is not what you want to be doing in Cape Town, South Africa, when you're out of your mind. But I'm here anyway to tell the story. And yeah, I did that in various places. So I can relate to that, slightly different context. But now when I go back to those places,
No, but you're right. They're all the same, aren't they? When you're drawn to drinking, you end up just doing it in different places and thinking you're having an exotic time when all you've done is gone to another bar.
Exactly.
Oh dear. So, Lauren, you talked about using Meetup to find new friends. Finding, I do find a lot in a club soda community that not only do people currently, when before they change their drinking, actually do feel lonely. We often think that we might lose friendships, but often we are already at a stage of life where we're not sure about where our friendships have landed and we feel quite lonely. And there is a real fear that you're going to be even more lonely if you give up drinking. Or there's this anxiety around finding new friends and people are really anxious about it. And in fact, of all the things that people talk about when changing drinking, it's the one where I want to just wrap my arms around people and say that if you just put yourself out there, it will all work out. Everyone is socially anxious, but making friends is one of the most beautiful things that we can do in this world. And start looking and going, and you will make friends. You know, follow up people who you've enjoyed spending time with and ask them if they'd like to do something else. But it still seems to be like this big insurmountable thing in people's heads. How can they get over that? How can people get over that fear and do it anyway?
Yeah, I mean, what would have really helped me, because I wasn't aware of any of these platforms and Club Soda and everything that was going on, and what would have helped me was having, you know, people like ourselves saying that there are people out there, and even the fact that we're talking about it, there are people out there that do cool things, and, you know, not everybody goes out at the weekend and drinks. You just tend to think that everybody else is doing that. You literally, I remember thinking, the only people that are not doing what I'm doing are people that are in church right now. And that's nothing against church or whatever, but I just literally thought these people don't exist. And if they do, they are, well, I just thought they were losers, which it just couldn't be further from the truth, you know. But I also think, Laura, that it is worth pointing out whenever people do change their relationship with alcohol, especially if it's been kind of extreme, there is that time where you do feel a little bit lonely, but I think it's more to do with you're in this kind of identity void and you're like, who the hell am I anyway? And it's more of that kind of lost feeling, because you don't even know who you are really anymore. And this doesn't apply to everybody, especially if you're maybe a gray area drinker. But those kind of feelings are inevitable. And I feel like people eventually do put themselves out there, but definitely you have to, if that goes on and you still haven't sort of checked out what events are on in your area and you're 6 months down the line, a year, it's gonna be crap. You need to put yourself out there and just take advantage of all the resources and just listen to us when we tell you that there are people out there doing other things, and there are lots of new amazing friendships to be made.
It's true. And actually this morning the session was on identity, and it was really, really good because you have to remember that things won't always stay the same. You may feel awkward right now. You may feel like you might be losing some friends. You may feel anxious about not having friends. You may not be sure who you are, but that doesn't last forever. That's change. That's a process of change, and you will begin to find your feet and your authentic self and the things that you enjoy, and they will begin to bring you friends. And the other thing is that I realized that when I was drinking, I always thought I was lonely, and therefore I was drinking. Actually, what I was afraid of being alone, because I was afraid of that guilt that I had from drinking. So it was like this vicious cycle that I felt guilty for drinking, and therefore was frightened about being on my own, and so drank to deal with being frightened of being on my own. And actually, alone is a state that I've learned to really enjoy and realize that I need. I've never been lonely. I just confuse lonely and alone. And actually alone is something that I really enjoy now. And I'm not frightened of it because I'm not feeling so guilty of all of my behaviors. So don't get those two things confused.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Amanda, what in terms of persuading or encouraging or giving people confidence to put themselves out there, what should they do?
Yeah. Oh, so many good things to jump off of. I'm going to kind of segue off of what Lauren had mentioned about when you traveled, kind of being drawn to these groups of people that take you off of the path that you think is ideal, and take you back into your old habits, right? You were meeting up with the partiers, the pub goers, and you were getting pulled into that. And that's because, you're the deciding factor. Wherever you go, there you'll be. And you're always going to be attracted to the thing that feels most comfortable, right? Because like attracts like. So of course, right now, and that puts your blinders on too. So all you can see is people who party and drink. Therefore, all you think that exists are people who party and drink. But if you open up and also start to shift your behaviors and your beliefs and your ways of thinking and believe that there could be other people out there, there could be, and there probably is, someone who has been right in your realm of orbit that would be a great, wonderful friend for you, but you have failed to notice them and they have failed to notice you because you are not yet a magnetic match for one another. So it could be the dude in the coffee shop you see every week, the gal who sits next to you in yoga. You've had the opportunity to talk, but they've never been drawn to talk to you, and you've never been drawn to talk to them because there's an energetic disconnect there. And once you start to align, you might see that the gal in yoga turns around and says, "Oh, hey, I've seen you here several times. What's your name again?" Or the guy in the coffee shop strikes up a conversation with you, or you're drawn to strike up a conversation with him when never before would you have even gone there. So know that the people who are probably your people are right around you. You've just failed to see them. And as you up level, you'll start to be drawn together. But I mean, you still have to do the work. You do still sometimes have to ask the person in the coffee shop.
Yeah, absolutely. Ask and put yourself in the middle of places like the walking groups. I'm in a silent movie group and all of those sorts of things. But I'm also very taken by what you said, which is that sometimes friendships start with micro interactions. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I love are micro interactions on the tube, people in shops, because I had lost all of those when I was drinking because I was always too hungover, and therefore any interaction seemed like too much hard work.
Yeah.
But of course, micro interactions are your way of breaking the ice and talking to people. And sometimes they would go somewhere and sometimes they don't. And sometimes it's just a rolling of your eyes that you share with somebody on the tube because something's happened. Yeah. They're all nurturing in different ways, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's just like, it's like back in the, early 2000s, pickup artistry was the thing in the dating world, right? it's the same thing in friendship, though. You're using a cute little pickup line to see if this person might want to talk to you a little bit more. And then if they do, you ask them on a friend date. And obviously that can be terribly confronting and vulnerable. And what's the worst that could happen? They say, no, I don't want to. And then you move along and try the next micro interaction or pickup line. And it can be scary, but it is a great way to get to know people who you might not have otherwise interacted with.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because a lot of dating apps have friendship options, and people may know that Drew and Lucy, my co-founders, I met on a dating site, and Hannah, who's on the front page of our website for ages, I met on a dating site because I always met people on the basis of a friendship first, using the friendship part of that. And so actually nearly everybody I did my first dates with sober, I'm still friends with, because there were lots of things that we had in common. Just sex and intimacy probably wasn't one of them. So there are ways to find people, and yes, you're right, the tools and skills are slightly similar. So yeah, cool.
I think you definitely do. Oh
no, carry on.
Say something?
No, carry on, Lauren.
No, I was just thinking, it's funny, it's kind of a catch-22, because only when, well, I'll speak for myself, only whenever I took or removed alcohol from my life, I started to do, different kind of self-development work, and then start to understand how, different energies align and how you attract and repel different people out of your life. And it's kind of like, until you remove the booze, of course you can do that kind of work and maybe still be drinking a little bit, but when you're caning it every single weekend, and you try to do that work, you can't really embody it. And you don't really know what people are talking about when they say, by focusing and this, that you attract those people into your life. It's something that kind of, it comes whenever you do change your behavior. So it's a shame how that actually, well, that's just the way it is. And it's great, but I totally know what you mean, Amanda. And that's exactly how it works, isn't it? You just draw in people who you never might have before. And just as when you used to be partying like mad, you used to just immediately attract those kind of people.
Yeah, I wonder if I don't believe in having an aura, but there is something, you probably give off so many different vibes when you're not hungover. When you're not drinking, or when you're working on self-development, or when you're thinking through your life in a bit more detail, or when you're living authentically, that it will begin to draw people into your orbit. And that's really exciting, because people will, avoid you if you're a big drinker, because it's actually boring. Those people.
Really. Brilliant,
guys. I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to thank you for your time, and it's a real good note to leave the festival on, and just to reassure people that there are friends out there for them, and they're there to go and meet. So go out into the world and make new friends. You're going to have a ball.